Well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here and happy summer solstice. My name is Celeste May Francisco, and I'm the State Director with Environment Oregon and Environment Oregon Research and Policy Center. And I'm really excited about today's webinar, Going Solar in Oregon. I want to extend a big thank you to our co-hosts, A&R Solar, the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association, or OSIA, and OSPERG Foundation. So here's the agenda for our webinar today. So I'm going to start with just a big picture overview of why using the sun's rays to power our lives is important. And then I'm going to hand things over to Mark Farrell from A&R Solar, who's going to walk through the process of getting rooftop solar in Oregon. And then we'll have Angela Crowley-Cook, the Executive Director of OSIA, talk about the different incentives that are available here in Oregon, who qualifies and how to get them. And then we have two homeowners on who got solar panels on their homes. My good friends, Charlie Plybin and Dave Rosenfeld are here to answer questions about their experience getting solar. And then we will open it up for questions from you all. So feel free at any time throughout the presentation to ask questions using the Q&A function on Zoom. And we'll try to answer it as we go, or you can also ask your questions at the end. All right. So why solar? So solar power is critical to protecting the environment. It's an energy source that we can depend on to be virtually pollution-free. Harnessing the power of the sun with solar energy means cleaner air, a more stable climate, and less strain on natural resources. With each new kilowatt hour of solar, we chip away at our reliance on polluting fossil fuels and take a step toward a cleaner, healthier society. Solar energy also makes our energy grid more resilient. So it reduces the need for generation from central power plants. And over the long lifetime of solar systems, it also can increase price stability and grid reliability. You can make your own home even more resilient by adding a battery to your solar energy system. And as an added bonus, going solar can reduce your utility bill. So when you install solar panels, your savings depend on a few different factors, including how much energy your solar system produces, how much energy you use, and the incentives that are available in your area. But regardless, generating your own energy with a rooftop solar panel system can help reduce your utility bill and protect you from rising electricity prices. Most homeowners find that they save thousands of dollars on electricity bills over the 25-year lifespan of their solar panel system. So I thought it'd be interesting to just show you a quick snapshot of solar in Oregon. So according to the Oregon Department of Energy, in 2019, over 18,000 residential and commercial rooftops have solar panels, and that number has only grown since then. Solar accounts for 1.7% of the electricity generated in Oregon. So most of that is from utility scale solar, but there is some from rooftop solar as well. A couple of months ago, Environment Oregon Research and Policy Center released our Shining Cities report. It's a national report that we release every year, looking at the top cities across the country for rooftop solar installation. Portland ranked 23rd nationally for the total amount of solar installed, but was highlighted as a solar star because we have over 50 watts of solar power installed per person in Portland. But we have a lot more potential for solar than we're using. So a lot of people think Oregon doesn't have a lot of solar potential because it's cloudy and rainy. And frankly, after this winter and spring in Western Oregon, I could definitely see how someone would think that. But the reality is that Oregon does have significant solar generation potential. So a report from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory estimates the annual technical potential of solar in Oregon is 1,775 terawatt hours. So to put that number in perspective, in 2018, our total electricity demand was 51 terawatt hours in Oregon. So the potential is there. We just need more utility scale projects going online and more Oregonians deciding to put solar on their homes and businesses. Plus, if we are going to power our lives with 100% clean electricity by 2040, which the state of Oregon has committed to doing, then we need to get as much energy as we can from the sun. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mark from A&R Solar to walk us through the basic steps of getting rooftop solar in Oregon. So take it away, Mark.
All right, thank you, Celeste. I appreciate that. Let me figure out how to share my screen. There we go. All right. How does that look?
Looks great.
Looks great. Thank you. All right. Terrific. Well, going solar in Oregon is actually pretty simple. These days, what do we all do? We Google to find out products and services that we want. So that's what most folks are going to do. And you'll go to the website, you'll go to various websites, and you'll take a look at these companies. It's really important when you look at solar companies that you do your research. You read through their websites, you look at the reviews, you see where they're based and how they run their companies. We just think that's really important. A&R Solar, for example, it's a regional company. I'm the Oregon sales manager, and we're based here in Tualatin. We've got about 26 employees, Oregon employees. So all the people that work on your roof are our employees. And requesting a quote is pretty easy. Most of the websites have a place where you can fill out a form where basically name, address, phone number, and then you have someone who's going to give you a call. In our case, we call that the welcome team. And the welcome team does the initial screening, as it were, to understand where your project is, take a look at a couple of aerial photographs to help you decide whether this is a good site for solar, because sometimes, honestly, the sites just aren't very good. And we'll be very honest with folks. This could be a difficult one for these reasons, but most of the time, things work out quite well. So once we do that, you're going to go to, and there's the form, as you can see there. You can also call us. There's a phone number right there. But basically, once you do that, it goes to one of the solar design consultants. And those are the folks who are really going to get in depth with your project. They're going to take a look at your rooftop from using our photographs. They'll use various digital tools as well to figure out how much solar you can get on that roof. They'll also ask you about your load profile. How much energy are you using? So between these conversation or two, you can figure out, okay, let's go for that proposal. And it's pretty simple, because all we do is we're going to do a site evaluation on site most of the time, or sometimes it's just a remote, because we work over the entire state. If I've got somebody in Pendleton, we're going to do a remote evaluation to begin with. I've been doing solar in Oregon for 12 years now, and I can tell you the tools and our process has changed dramatically, and I'm very impressed as to how much we can get done remotely these days. So the design consultant will create a design that fits your goals and makes good financial sense. So basically, it's site evaluation, estimate, review, and then if you decide to go to contract, we get the ball rolling. And then once a contract is signed, we do absolutely everything. We're a full electrical contractor, a full general contractor, which, by the way, your folks, any of the contractors that you talk to, they should absolutely be registered with the CCV to make sure that they can do the project correctly. So from permits to installation to final inspections, we'll take care of the whole thing. It's important to think about solar as this is a very important asset permanently attached to your roof. So you want to make sure that your roof is ready. Having a roof that, in my case, should have at least 20 years of life left is really important, because that solar is going to be up there for at least 25 or 30 years. The warranties surrounding the solar modules and the inverters, as you see back here, are about 25 years these days. So it's going to be making power for a very long time. Having a new roof a relatively new roof is very important. Some of the requirements, like I know the Energy Trust says at least 10 years, which is great, but I used to do roofing for a living, and I know that it's difficult to take a system down in 10 years and put it back up. It's incredibly expensive, as it turns out. And sometimes it may not even be possible given code changes. So going solar is pretty basic, but understanding the companies that you're working with is really very important. And understanding the financing around it. Some folks pay cash, some folks get a HELOC, other folks are going to a credit union, and some other companies offer financing themselves. But really take a hard look at these numbers to see which system works best for you. And also, I would say that your solar company should have a service department. This is very robust technology, and it just sort of works. But every now and then something might happen, and you need to be able to get a hold of these folks and say, hey, you know what, I think my solar's not working quite as well. And then we can look at it remotely, given the monitoring that automatically comes with the system. So we can look online to see what's going on. And 80% of the time, it's something that we can deal with online, meaning it might be your internet might be down for a while, maybe somebody unplugged the Cat 5e that goes right into your router. It's funny how often that happens, but it happens. So we can actually help folks with that because we actually give a 10-year production guarantee. We want to make sure that things are going to work like they're supposed to for a very long time. So having a service department, having people in state who could actually help you out is very important. And that's basically going solar. That's kind of, it's pretty simple.
Thank you so much, Mark. So now I'm going to turn things over to Angela to talk a little bit about solar incentives available here in Oregon.
Great. Thank you, Celeste. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen as well. Here we go. Okay. So I'm Angela Crowley-Cook. I'm the Executive Director of OSEA, the Oregon Solar Plus Storage Industries Association. Oops. Let's see. Are you all seeing these notes over here, or are you just seeing the slide itself?
Notes.
Okay. Let's see if that works.
Yeah, I'm still seeing this.
Nope. Yes. Does that work for everybody? Just the slide and not the notes, right? Okay. Sorry about that. So OSEA is a trade association. So that means we work with solar companies that work here in Oregon and other stakeholders that are interested in solar, like Environment Oregon. And I want to talk to you today about the different solar incentives that you can receive in Oregon. So the first is the Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. These incentives are available for PGE and Pacific customers only, and they're for systems that are greater than 2 kilowatts, which is pretty small. So most homes would be larger than 2 kilowatts. These incentives are flat incentives, and they decrease during the year as the money in that fund is kind of used up each year. So for PGE, it started out as a $1,200 per home system in January. We had a lot of interest in the first quarter of this year and the second quarter. So now that incentive is $800, and it may go down later in the year. Pacific Power was $900 per system in the beginning of the year. It's now $600. And these incentives go through the solar company, the solar installer that you pick to work with. And so they will apply for that incentive and let you know what the amount is. You just work through them. Those incentives also have a component, a special program for low-income ratepayers. It's called Solar Within Reach. So those incentives are higher, as you can see, for both PGE and PacifiCorp customers. And you can work with your solar installer to see if you qualify as low or moderate income for the Solar Within Reach program. And then we're excited to announce that because of legislation passed in 2021, there will soon be incentives from Energy Trust for including battery storage with your solar system. That's exciting. Stay tuned for that. Now, if you're not a PGE or Pacific Power customer, you can still receive an incentive. And that is through the Oregon statewide Solar Plus Storage Rebate Program. These rebates are available to any utility customer in the state. But if you have other utility incentives, like the Energy Trust, which is technically utility funded, or the city of Ashland, for example, they have that city municipal electrical utility has their own solar incentive. So if you get another utility incentive, that does lower your statewide rebate. The maximum rebate is $5,000 for a home system. And then if you purchase storage when you purchase that solar, and so you have a combined solar plus storage system, you can receive an additional incentive up to $2,500 for that storage. This program also has a special provision for low and moderate income homeowners, which receive a higher rebate. And then the rebate program also has a provision for low income service providers. And those are folks like nonprofits or affordable housing, and that receives a higher rebate as well. And as I mentioned, the storage has to be installed. Oops, it should say with solar, not with storage. Solar and storage have to be installed together in order to receive that storage rebate. This is also handled through your installer, and so you don't have to worry about applying for that. Your installer will take care of that for you and show that discount on your contract. The one you do have to take care of on your own is the federal incentive, and that's the federal investment tax credit. We are working with our friends in Congress to try and improve the investment tax credit, or the ITC. But how it is now, through the end of this year, it's a 20% tax credit that you take on your personal taxes for solar systems. It will step down to 22% of that system in 2023 and is set to end in 2024. However, we're working to change that. We are working at the national level to increase the ITC. It used to be 30%. We'd like to see it back up at 30%. We'd like it extended for 10 more years. And most importantly, we'd like to make that ITC refundable so that low-income customers and taxpayers can use that and make it a refundable credit. We're also asking for flexibility for large-scale solar systems who use the ITC. And for those larger scale systems, there would also be labor standards that would come hand in hand with that new increased ITC. So these provisions were supposed to be in the Build Back Better bill that we hoped Congress would pass last year. However, we're still hopeful that we will get a new bill, hopefully in the next month, think really good thoughts, that will include these provisions. Now, if you can't install solar on your home, there is another option in Oregon. There's a program called Community Solar, and that's for PGE and Pacific Power customers. You can subscribe to a project that is not on your home, but is located elsewhere in Oregon. And you subscribe for a kind of chunk of that project that matches 80% of your yearly energy uses. Now, different projects will come with different discounts. It depends on which project you sign up for. However, low-income customers always receive a discount, which ends up being about 20% on their bill. And so if you're interested in community solar and you'd like to sign up for a project, you can visit that website there, or just type in Oregon Community Solar in your search bar to find out more about it and sign up for a project. And then lastly, I'll just mention a couple other solar incentives. These are not something that you as a homeowner or a business could do on your own. You'd have to work through other entities. So one is the Portland Clean Energy Fund, or PCEF. Those are grants given to nonprofits for clean energy and other types of projects. They have to be located within the city limits of Portland, though. And generally, the types of solar incentives you'd see would be for Habitat for Humanity homes, affordable housing, or other nonprofit buildings. On the state level, there is a new state Oregon Community Renewable Energy Grant Fund, and those grants are given to public entities or tribes. And so it could be a city or a county or a state agency, and the funds can be used for planning and building renewable projects, including renewable projects that have resiliency. And so that means battery storage that works with the solar to save that energy for use either during a power outage or at night. So that those are the incentives that we currently have in Oregon. And except for that federal ITC, which your installer would help guide you through the process of how to take that, the other ones your installer would take care of for you and would talk with you about when you sign up. So that is it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela. There is actually one quick question for you that Sandra wrote in and just wanted to know quickly, what is the criteria for low-income homeowners? I think probably in reference to the solar and storage program, if you know the answer.
Yes, for the rebate program. I will find those requirements and I'll post them in the chat. Okay,
great. Thank you so much. All right, and now I'm going to have my two friends, Dave and Charlie, who recently got solar on their homes, to answer some questions about the process of getting solar. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for being here. So my first question for you both is just, why did you decide to get solar on your home? And then did you decide to get battery storage too? And why or why not? Like, what was your decision making there? And Dave, why don't we start with you?
It kind of was just the win-win. I wanted to save money on our electricity bill over the long run. And we wanted to help the environment as well. We care about climate change. And the way we saw it was just, our utility bills never go down, they go up, and we're not going anywhere in our home. And so it was like, as soon as we could make it pencil out, we decided to do it. And we didn't get the batteries yet. I think we do want battery storage. I think we're thinking power outages are going to become more and more frequent. And it would just be good to keep that extra energy and just, have it be a little bit more available. But the price tag was just way too much for the time being. So, it seems like that's a little earlier. Solar panels have gotten a lot cheaper over the last 15, 20 years. The same thing will happen with batteries. And so when the price gets right, we'll go for it. And then, we just got an electric car about a year ago. So maybe that'll, they keep saying vehicle to grid is going to happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So we're just going to hold off a little bit more, either until the rebates get a little better or the price gets better. But definitely we want to do it. We want to have a battery at some point.
Awesome. Charlie?
I don't know what's left for me to say. I say largely a lot of the same reasons that Dave provided was really why I decided, me and my partner decided to invest in solar. I think we live on the Oregon coast, and we felt for a number of years there were a lot of barriers. There were not installers. It was hard to find anybody who was licensed to do that work that was within 100 miles of here, or maybe 50 miles or so. It was expensive for us. And as much as I am an environmentalist, I'm more of a power miser than I am an investor in those things. And so I think my partner got tired of me just always being such a power miser and really wanted to investigate it. And, we finally were able to get somebody to come out to our house, and it kind of didn't seem like it made a whole lot of sense at first from an economic standpoint. The guy did a really extensive survey, all for free, came out and did all this work for free on our home, and basically said, look, it's going to take about 30 years based on your tree coverage here to pay this off. And I was like, well, we can just save that much power. And we decided to cut some trees down instead. And they were small trees and inconsequential, and it provided some additional parking and storage area on the property, but it also meant that we were able to generate about 80% of our own electricity. So that was pretty significant, and it will pay off in less than 10 years.
Awesome. We have a question from Emily Jackson. She said, I'm having a hard time choosing a reputable company. Any tips on choosing a company, or any good experiences or recommendations? Dave, I'll kick that one to you.
Yeah. So we actually were shopping around for solar for like 3 or 4 years before we finally decided to go with it. It took a while. And part of it was the roof, which Mark mentioned before. The roof needed work. So we wanted to just kind of cross that, check that box. But all the while I was always on the lookout for solar companies. So I'd say the first thing is just like, don't get rushed into anything. Like, do it on your terms, not anyone else's. And if somebody's trying to pressure you, probably that's not a good business to work with. So that's one. I think two is like, just get 3 bids, and, bids where the company comes out, like what Charlie was saying, they do the survey for free. They get up on your roof. They give you like a really good bid that's really detailed, and they can answer your questions in a way that makes sense to you, like it's not going over your head. And then, I think that's what we did. And, every company that came out was good. Like, I don't think we had any sketchy people, but you kind of knew it when, we decided to go with Elemental, and we're in Portland. But I think there's others that are good too. And it was just a good price, and they just seemed like they could answer my questions. I'm not a genius. I'm not technical. And they just kind of got my questions answered that I really cared about. So I think getting the 3 bids is really, really key. And then in terms of like, there was 3 things I did background checks on each of the companies. One was just like, made sure they had a contractor license that was legit. I checked to make sure that they were a member of Angela's organization, the OSEA, because I just figured if they're part of a trade group, they're paying their dues, they're part of the community, they're not just some fly by night. And then there's this other certification, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's called NABCEP, and it's basically like a national training program that the company has to go through to make sure that they're really an expert. And so I just figured, like, if all three of those certifications are checked and I like them, and they came out and did an assessment and answered my questions and gave me something good, it was relatively easy to choose. So the biggest thing is just beating the bushes, and you may want to get more than 3 to come out, but you don't have to go overboard. But that's what I did, and we were very satisfied.
If I can chime in here,
yeah,
you can definitely do all the homework that Dave did, because he's very thorough. Or if you're a PGE or a Pacific Core customer, you can have Energy Trust do the work for you. If you go to the Energy Trust of Oregon website, they work with solar companies and kind of make sure that they are good solar companies, they're doing solid work, they pass inspections, and they will help you, they will send you the names of 3 companies where you can get a bid. So you can definitely kind of take the easy route and work with Energy Trust on that.
Thanks, Angela. Anything to add, Charlie?
No, I think, our experience on the coast was a little different in that we didn't have a lot of people that were dying to come out to our house, both because of the size of our house and the energy demand. And so I started with people I knew. I knew installers in the Valley, and I knew people on the Southern Oregon coast. And I had a friend who was actually interested in becoming a licensed contractor locally, and I helped compel him that this was a great idea. So I kind of saw him through his whole trade process and had a lot of trust there. But again, I was able to kind of compare my experience to that of others, and that, I knew that I needed him to do all the work, and I was willing to pay for it, and I knew how much money we were going to pay for it. But I wanted to be pretty hands-off, and I wanted to have a lot of information. So everything from my tax rebates and other opportunities for getting rebates, all of that, I just left it up to him. And he came and equipped, did a really great job, and I was able to compare that to some other people's experiences. And so I think that's kind of the key, that it was super professionally done. And I could see it coming, that this was a good job. I do think the roof, particularly living on the coast, is a key factor as well. That held us up for a little while too, is just making sure that we're investing in the whole thing. This is essentially a part of your roof that you're putting on your house now, and it is infrastructure, it's another part of your house. And so that was really key area for us that sort of waffled when and how we used a contractor.
Great. And we have a question from Barbara. She just wants to know, how long did the entire process take for you to get your solar panels up?
It was fast. It was fast. We signed our contract, I think, in like February. We hired a separate roofer. This was last year. The roofer came out and did the work in March, and then the solar people came out in April, and it was like a month from start to finish. And 1 week of that was just waiting for PG&E to turn it on. But even PGE was quick. So it was a month. At the point that the truck came and started doing the work, to the point where the system was producing.
Yeah, I'd say maybe a week in my case. We had a little bit of time with our contractor before that and trying to get them, scheduled to the site. But from the day they started drilling holes in our roof, which that was the one thing that made me a little paranoid, when people start drilling holes in your roof. And again, living on the coast, assured me they're watertight, and I have not had a leak in the 2 years that I've had them. So I'm feeling good about that. But yeah, I want to say it was like maybe 8 days, 7 or 8 days. And they just kind of didn't stop until it was done. And then the next week we were connected, and our power company was super fast.
And then what benefits have you all seen since installing solar? Like, what's the energy cost savings that you're seeing?
That's the best part.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
That's
incredible.
The coolest thing. Like, you don't realize how cool it is until you get an energy bill and you look at the graph and it's like 0. and there's nothing, and you're pushing energy rather than taking energy. And I don't think anybody can prepare you for what it feels like to look at that first power bill. That's kind of like, that was it. And the other thing is the geeky technology feedback. Like, you're going to get way into like how much power you use, because you get all this feedback from the system. So those things are probably, I can't even, there's more to it than the money. There's a lot of feeling that you get from that power bill, I'll say.
Yeah, you just feel like, you just feel like you made this incredibly good investment. Like it was good for your family and your finances. It makes you kind of feel good that you finally did something that was kind of like long-term, because like even my payback's going to be a little bit longer, but you're still waiting 10 years to kind of recoup the investment. But you know that it's good, and then it's good for the planet. Like, and then I think for us, like, the savings came so fast, and you're also accumulating credits, because the surplus energy you share with the grid, you get a credit for. And so then as the autumn kind of rolls in and the production is less, those credits get applied. So last year, it wasn't until November that we started, paying for power again. But it also just made us kind of think like, oh, maybe we should get an electric car. So it sort of cascaded for us, like just thinking, all right, like if we can charge our car with the sun, and then obviously that was prescient, because now I'm looking at these gas prices, and I don't mean to be neener to like the folks who haven't made that switch yet, but it becomes a little bit of a gateway drug to some of the other things that we ought to be doing for the planet too. So it is a really great feeling, those savings.
Great. We're getting a lot of technical questions, so I'm going to bring Angela and Mark back in a moment. But first, I wanted to just ask both of you, what advice do you have for people who are either thinking about it or like are actively looking to install solar on their homes? What's your big piece of advice?
Well, I guess I would say don't be afraid to make the investment. I think I'm a miser on a lot of levels. Like, I was a power miser, I'm a money miser, and I was like really thoughtful about it. I think it's okay to be super thoughtful and do really good research. But like I said, until you get that first power bill back, like you just don't even kind of realize like all those things that were in the back of your head that made you question it kind of just immediately, for me, they just immediately went away. And I was in a place where, the solar contractor told me like, I don't know if I would do it here. I mean, based on your return on investment with these trees and everything else, he's like, unless you're willing to cut some trees down. And, so it wasn't like I was being convinced by the contractor to do this. But in the end, yeah, I say, don't be brave. Take the risk in reducing your power bill and making yourself feel a lot better about your contributions to the world and to the grid.
I agree with that. And I think I would also just say, like, don't be a shrinking violet. It's a big investment. It's your roof, it's your money. Just leave no, if you got questions, get them answered. If you don't like the answer, keep asking. If you don't like the way they're answering those questions, cross them off the list and move on to another installer. Like, I don't know, like, just be bold in that way too. So that by the time you're pulling the trigger, you're like, okay, I feel like I really understand what I'm getting myself into.
Awesome. All right, we're going to bring Mark and Angela back to help answer some of these questions that we have. So there's a lot of questions just about the process of, getting your roof changed before adding solar. And are there companies that will do both at the same time? Or is it usually like you just need to get your roof replaced and then get solar panels after that? Angela or Mark, yeah.
I think there are one or two maybe companies that might offer both. However, really they're two separate processes. 10 years ago or so, we tried to say, well, maybe we should do some of the work while the roof's going on. It turned out to be a big mess. So in general, vet your roofer, get a good roof, and then vet your solar contractors, and you could schedule it close together, meaning, okay, the roof's done, a week later, solar happens. But it's not that big of a deal. The way that the solar systems get attached to the home, they're basically meant to go on after the roof is complete.
Got it. And then we did ask Dave and Charlie like how long the whole process took, but Mark, did you want to just answer that question from a installer perspective?
Yeah.
In your experience, how long does the process take?
It could take 12 to 14 weeks from when you first contact your installers. Basically, everything takes time. You need to contact a couple of different companies. You need to get them to call you back. We try to get back to folks that day. Then you're having conversations. Then you're setting up the site survey. And oh, maybe you're away that week, and then the contractor's away that week. Do you see what I'm saying? So it just takes time to get things going. Now, they are correct in saying, yeah, once you get a contract signed, there's more time that has to elapse because plans have to be made, permits have to be applied for, products have to be obtained. But once they're on site, yeah, it's going to go up quite quickly. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, depending on the system size. Then there's inspections, and PGE or whoever the utility does have to come out and turn it on, basically. So that's the 2 to 3 week period I think Charlie and Dave were talking about. But in general, the process does take a lot longer. But it's typical for any sort of large contracting project you would do on your home.
Got it. All right, we have a question from Mark. He's asking, how long is net metering locked in on a project after the contract is signed, and can a utility stop the net metering arrangement after a project is built?
At the moment, for PG and Pacific Power especially, it's there's no end date, so net metering is continuing to happen. Now, on a policy side, Angela, one of the things that OSEA is doing that I know of is they're constantly working with the PUC to try to protect net metering, because a lot of the utilities are kind of cranky about it because in some ways they see lost revenue. But at the moment and for the foreseeable future, it just works.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'll just add on to that this is kind of where we want you to pull out your advocacy and your activist hats. In Oregon, net metering is protected. Like Mark said, there's no end date. There's no reason why it should change. However, we've seen other states the utilities in other states try to attack net metering. This is happening in California. It's happening in Florida. And what the utilities want to do is essentially pay you less for the power that you're creating. And so far, we've been successful at fighting those attacks, but we know the utilities will keep trying. They see solar on your house as a competitor, which it is, right? You're making your own power. And so there's no call to action yet in Oregon, but OSEA will work closely with Environment Oregon when there is a call to action and ensure that we protect this policy, because like Celeste mentioned, having solar on your roof and on business roofs, that's a really important part of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so we will call on you when we need to in Oregon, but fingers crossed we won't need to do that.
All right, we have a question from Joel. He's saying, I am participating mostly because our church here in Salem is interested. I'm unclear about whether there are incentives for churches or nonprofits because we do not have much money to make the initial investments.
Yeah, good question. I can start with that. Solar, the incentives you get always depends on what utility you're in. So that if that Salem church is in Pacific Core territory or PGE, it may be different than if it's in the Salem municipal electrical utility. But in any case, there are incentives for business, so would be considered a commercial project. If that church qualifies as a low-income service provider, if it provides daycare for low-income community members or other services for low-income community members, it might qualify under the Solar Plus Storage rebate program. And you can learn about that at the website. I'll paste something into the chat there, Joel, about low-income service providers. And then the other thing I mentioned was the statewide community renewable energy grant program. That's something that only public entities would apply for. So it wouldn't be your church proper. But if the church was part of a resiliency plan or a microgrid, which is kind of an area of a community that is hooked up to batteries and can operate when the power goes out, it might be possible. There are also some installers that will work with you to try and take advantage of that federal investment tax credit, even though nonprofits don't have a tax liability. Mark, is there anything you want to add in on that?
Not really, no. Thanks, that was a good explanation.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Okay, we're getting questions about cost. Dave and Charlie, only if you're comfortable answering this question, how much did your systems cost? And then we are just generally, people are wondering, what are we talking here? Like ballpark, how much does it cost to install solar? What about the battery? Anybody can answer if you're comfortable.
Sure, I can start. I was just typing up a response there and I'll stop typing that. I have a small home. And so it's a relatively small roof area to cover. We do have 16 panels on our roof, but it was all in before rebates and everything else. It was almost $18,000 for everything. Now walking away with our rebates at the end, I think we paid about $11,000. It would have been about twice as much if we had done the battery storage. So that was my solar experience. We did not do the battery storage because of the expense, but I did note the policy opportunity there. So
we have 32 panels, and I forget if it was 21,000 or 23,000 before rebates and tax credits, but it was something like that. And then I think after tax credit and that kind of thing, it's like 16.5. But the way we financed it was we refinanced our house and then just did a cash out on equity. So there's some interest there that I think is about like 6,500. So if you add that, then it's whatever 16,005 plus 6,500. But I intend to pay that down faster so that we don't pay any of that interest. So 16.5 is what I'll say for that. And that's just another thing to think about, by the way, when you're doing your loan and thinking about your payback period and asking your installer to help you calculate that. Just think about that as well.
And then Jennifer's wondering, are there different grades of panels? Like, do some panels produce more energy than others?
Yes, so there are different manufacturers. There are different wattages per panel. Right now, we're looking at wattages anywhere from 370 watts, that's the low side, to about 410 watts, the high side. The solar panel industry has been in a big turmoil recently, and we're hoping things will settle out because we did have some larger wattage modules not too long ago, but now those are gone. So we do our best to keep a supply going. And what we'll do is we will look at, there's a lot of different factors in the design side. There's, of course, cost, there's the size of the roof, there's your goals as a homeowner. And we put all those factors in there to try to get the best design that makes the most sense for what you want to do.
Great. Steve is wondering from Dave and Charlie, did you convert other systems in your home to electric, like a heat pump or an induction stove? Like, is your plan to go kind of like fossil fuel free in your home? Yes.
Yeah, gradually. Like,
yeah,
I think Charlie said this in the beginning. Like, I mean, I'm a miser too, so like we care about the planet, but there's got to be a value proposition. So our gas stove went, and it was like the coolest thing in the world to just say, yeah, we're cutting off the gas stove, we're doing an induction, and that was right around the time we were getting the solar. I mentioned the electric car, and then we're just going to wait till the furnace and water heater explode, and then we'll do the electric.
Yeah, I kind of internalized where our highest expenses of electricity were coming from when during this process. So that led me to the replacing our hot water heater. I did put in a hybrid hot water heater, which also serves the dual purpose of air conditioning the air in my garage. So it's like great, it dries out my garage, and my garage is a wet space. So that's been a really cool investment. I also get a lot of feedback and data from that too, which I equally appreciate, and I can sort of tweak that. So the heat pump water heater was another investment. And then we also put in a heat pump in the house as well. So that was an investment in our heating.
Great. Jeremiah says, I always see ads saying the government is buying solar for people, and that there are some companies that advertise that they're giving power walls. Is there any truth to that, or is it a bogus clickbait ad?
Good question. I can start out on that one. This is one of those things where you definitely should make sure you're looking into that solar company and getting 3 bids before you accept a contract. Nothing's free, right, in life, including solar panels. Those companies may be talking about that eventually your system will pay for itself. And so in the end, you won't be paying anything. But for most solar systems, there is an upfront cost included, even with all the incentives and rebates that are there. I've never heard of anyone giving away a power wall. Those are very expensive. Maybe Mark has heard of something, but that seems highly unlikely to me.
Yeah, we're not giving anything away. And yeah, like as Angela said, it's just a way to get people to their websites. And you just need to vet your contractors, make sure that when they give you a proposal, that's the other thing, is really understanding that proposal. I've seen different proposals where it's really kind of confusing. You don't quite know what's going on. Our approach is more consultative, where we want to work with people to make sure they understand. And some folks come back to us years later. I think Dave mentioned that, where, yeah, we've been looking at this for a long time. And I've had people that I've spoken to 3 years ago, and we went through the whole process, which was great. And they're like, this is great, but given what you said, I think we need a new roof. And I'm like, great, save money, get a new roof, I'll be around. And it turns out they come back, and I'm happy with that, because they did it the way that I thought would work best for them in the long run.
I think that stuff is clickbait, as far as I can tell. I wouldn't touch it. Do your own homework. Go to Energy Trust. Go to OSEA. Go on the internet. Just do it your way. That stuff just seems like nonsense to me. I can say that because I'm the consumer, right? Like I can. You guys have to be a little more, but that I wouldn't touch those ads.
Yeah. Great. Manuela, who is clearly an environmentalist, wants to know if the panels are recyclable or what happens to the panels when they're done.
Yeah, good question. And actually, I've been answering some of these questions in the Q&A. So if you see your question has disappeared, it's now in the answered tab. But I'll talk about recycling a little bit. So solar panels have a lifespan of 20 years. And so really just now we're starting to kind of perfect recycling for solar panels. Nobody has it down perfect yet, because honestly, there hasn't really been a huge need. There's not many solar panels that are ready for recycling quite yet. But we are working on this, both at a federal level and individual states. Washington State, in particular, passed a bill, I believe a few years ago, about recycling. And so they're studying it up there to have some best practices.
Great.
One of the things we found, so, the warranties for the production warranty for a lot of modules is quite high these days, meaning they warranty in 25 years, this solar module will make at least 80% of the rated wattage. Well, that's still a lot. But still, as things change, some people decide, well, I'm going to take this off my roof. Well, where do they go? Well, there are organizations that will take them to other countries or to lower income areas where they'll just give them away. And it makes sense. It's still making a lot of power. It still has a lot of life left. I mean, I saw a solar module at a customer's house like 10 years ago, and it was 40 years old, this little solar module, and he had it in a in a shed turning a fan. It just still works. It's solid state technology. When the sun's out, it just works. So recycling is important. That will come, but also there's a way to move things throughout the economy.
Great. All right, we have a question for Dave and Charlie. Again, if you're comfortable answering, what's the capacity in kilowatt hours in your two houses? Or how much solar did you get? You told us the number of panels, but do you know the number of kilowatt hours?
You want to go first, Charlie? So I'm not, this is like, I just look at the electricity bill and I go, less money is good. But,
Yeah.
it's a 30 kW system, or 32 K. No, it's a 10 kW system, which is about 32 panels. It's a little bit bigger than your average size system because I just wanted to just kind of go big or go home sort of thing. And then like on it, the spring is your peak, right around this time of year is your peak production because you're getting a lot of sun and it's not too hot. And so like a day like today where finally the sun is out and like the sun is out like all day, will peak around like between 50 and 60 kilowatt hours for the whole day. Now in the middle of the winter, and also we have a fair amount of shade, like we were a little over the shade threshold and we decided to go for it. This was part of that back and forth with the solar company because they were like, okay, let's make sure this works. And, we kind of really, and then I decided to just go for it because it just felt like, okay, let's do it. But I think if you didn't have any shade and you had the number of panels we had, you'd be doing a lot more than that. But that's good enough for us. That checks all the boxes in my criteria. And then in like, the cloudier weeks that we've just had, like the rainiest day at this time of year, when it was like, it's just raining all day, we're still getting about 20 kilowatt hours out of that day. And then when you're in the winter time, it's a lot less than that. It can be somewhere between 5 and 15. But on a sunny day in the middle of the winter, then we're getting quite a lot. So even in the winter, we're getting something, but that's kind of like the peak and the range.
Got it.
Yeah, a little bit smaller on my end. We deal with a bit more weather variability on the coast, and I didn't really think that was as much of an issue until this year when we had as much rain as we did. And I could see that we did have, significantly less produced. That question always baffles me. It's a range. There's no, the capacity, the max capacity. We don't have full exposure at my house, so we wouldn't hit max capacity, but we generally on a good day would produce about 50 kilowatt hours to 60 kilowatt hours. And I'm a power miser. Like I don't use much power in a small house. So that's pushing electricity back to the grid at that point. And then, in the winter time, we will see low, like 5 kilowatt hour type of days. But that could even happen in the spring here. If it's really, really bad weather, which unfortunately the beginning of the summer, we had a little bit of that, but it'll go back, it'll go away. We'll get paid back in dividends.
Yeah. I just realized like last year to year, 365 days, I think our system did 1.1 megawatts total, cumulative.
Great. All right. Well, somebody said, you homeowners are awesome, which I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Dave and Charlie, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Mark and Angela, thank you so much for being on to answer people's questions. If your question didn't get answered, please feel free to just email me, celeste@environmentoregon.org, and I can get your question answered by this esteemed panel. And then I'm going to send out the recording for this if you're interested in reviewing any of the information. And I'll also include a little guide for getting solar installed on your home that Environment Oregon put together. And I'll be sure to include some contact information for these folks as well. But happy summer solstice. Thank you so much. I think this was a really informative panel. I definitely learned a lot. And hopefully you all did too. So have a great rest of your day. And thank you again so much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.